listening to the Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another edition of the Motherhood Experience podcast. I am so thrilled to have you joining me today. This episode is a big one. Wow. I knew about this mom before I met her. How do I want to introduce her here? Once upon a time, story time with Val. Once upon a time, I was a Troop Shepard for American Heritage Girls in North Dakota. The troop was brand new, just off the ground, and I was a Troop Shepard. And so I met lots of beautiful inside and out girls who were a part of this troop. And Evie was one of the girls in the troop. I probably shouldn't admit that I had favorites, but if I could have picked a favorite, Evie would have been that one. And so Evie's mom, I met kind of through AHG. And then there's an incredible story involving an incredible miracle that you will hear about in this episode. I don't want to give too much of it away up front here because it's so powerful and encouraging and inspiring and all of the things. So before we get into this episode with my guest, Laura Hermunslie, I want to do the obligatory host ask. Please follow us on Instagram. If you can find or follow the new Facebook page that my husband has agreed to manage since Facebook banned me, you can follow us there. But please, 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 above all, go to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. That is how I can have direct communication with you. You can hear about guests upcoming, guests that we just had, events where I'll be speaking, other fun facts that I feel like sharing about myself or my life. I don't know. It's my email. I can put in it what I want, but that is the only guaranteed way you will be able to hear with me. With all of that said, themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. Now we're going to jump into this episode with Laura Hermunslie. I am so thrilled to have Laura joining me on the Motherhood Experience podcast today. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yes, and you have quite the story to tell, and I can't wait to get into it. But I start every episode with ages of kids and stage of motherhood you're in. So why don't you run through the list for me?
Okay, so our oldest is Cora. She's 18 and a senior this year. Evie is 16 and a junior. Lucy is 14 and in 8th grade. Grace is 12 and in 6th. Ida is 5 in kindergarten. And Graham just turned 4. And Micah is, he's 1. He'll be 2 in January.
And so for the grand total, that's 7 children.
That is 7. It is the number of completion, actually.
That's right. That is, yes. So when you and Ryan met, were dating, got married, was 7 a magic number for you? Were you just going to take it one kid at a time? What was your idea of family back then?
There are 4 kids in the family that I have. And Ryan was in just a family of 2 kids. And so 7 was never on the table. I used to say 4 to 6. I didn't like the odd number thing. I didn't want 5. I knew it had to be 4 or 6. But once I started having kids and I had 4, I was like, oh my word, we're done. Because every day was so hard. It was just like, kids are super needy and it was just really hard. And so I remember thinking when my number 4, Grace, when she was a baby, that if I accidentally got pregnant, I would just die because it would be just too much. When you're at your max, you can't imagine adding to that. But somewhere between Grace and Ida, our faith changed to a point where we started to wonder if God cared about how many kids we had. I mean, it was always about, what do I want? What do I want? And so we actually kind of prayed about it, which we hadn't done for the other 4. And then we're like, hey, I think we should have another kid. We both kind of came to that conclusion. We ended up having Ida, and then we didn't pray about Graham because she needed a friend. So then it was kind of like, that was plenty. I felt like 6 was plenty. But another long story, we felt like God was asking us to have one more. And that's the reason that people didn't find out I was expecting until I was 14, 15 weeks along, because I actually wasn't happy about it. Like, we had him on purpose, but it was an act of obedience on my part because I really felt like God was calling us to just have one more kid. That was very stretching. And of course, we love him. We would never give him away or anything like that, but it wasn't because I wanted another
That's
child.
pretty fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to peel back some layers on that later, but I have to know. And it seems like each time I got pregnant, the earlier it showed. Like by the third pregnancy, kind of the next day, it was obvious that, that I was pregnant.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
how could you, with your seventh baby, not tell people until 14, 15 weeks?
I don't know. Like, I guess it depends on what you wear. You can conceal things. And I've never been like a super, super skinny twig or anything where people be like, hey, I'm a mom. I've had quite a few kids. I can hide a little bit. But I guess that's a really good question. I don't really remember. I assume that I just wore some of my bigger shirts, and I don't know. But we always have to tell with the Ida, Graham, and Micah, we had to tell our big kids like pretty early on, because pretty much as soon as I'm pregnant, like, I'm so tired, I feel completely drained, as most women do, and all I want to do is lay on the couch. And I had to explain why I was being a terrible mom, because that's, you just like don't want to do anything, and you can't just like lay on the couch and be like, kids, pick up all the toys. And I usually feel like picking up is kind of a family effort. I'm working in the kitchen, everybody's cleaning up, and when I'm pregnant, it's like, nope, I'm gonna lay on the couch. So they
Mm.
found out really early, probably week 5 or whatever, because my energy would drain down to zero very quickly. So
Oh wow. And they were able to keep it a secret as well.
yeah, they were actually.
So you had 7 children. Do you homeschool?
I am only homeschooling Ida this year for kindergarten, which is essentially teaching her to read and lots of sticker books. It's just fun. It's easy. This is the second year we've had all of our 4 big girls in public school. They all went in at different ages, different times. So I was homeschooled when I was little for a couple years. I was homeschooled kindergarten and first, and then we moved out to the country and we started going to the public school. So in second grade, I was in public school. And then my mom tried to homeschool the next year again. So she homeschooled me for the first half of third grade. And then I don't remember the details of it or whatever, but she said we missed our friends. And so we actually went back to public school after that half year. And so my plan when I had kids was always going to be, I'm going to homeschool them when they're little, and then when they're bigger, like mid elementary, I'll put them in public school. By the time I started having kids, we were living in Minneapolis area, and I was like, I didn't really feel comfortable putting my kids in a big school system. I didn't go to a big one. I went to a small country school, and so it was like I wasn't comfortable with that. And so then I was thinking I would need to homeschool, but my firstborn is strong-willed a little bit. And so I was kind of, when we were living in the cities, I was going, how's this going to work to homeschool her? I don't think this is going to go very smoothly. And in that time, like, there was a small window of time when she was just before she turned 5. We had the decision to make whether my husband would come back and farm. So my husband is a tax accountant, but his dad farms, and my husband Ryan is the only son, and so he could farm if he wanted to. And so there was a time period we had to make the decision kind of out of nowhere that summer, if he was going to come back and farm or not, because it affected decisions that his father made for the farm, like, whether, it changes things if you're handing it down to your son or not. So we prayed about it and came to the conclusion we needed to move home. And so that's back where we grew up. That's the small school we both went to. And so then I was comfortable putting Cora in public school. So she and Evie, actually, our second born, went to a little bit of public school, but then 2 reasons we started homeschooling. One was the kids would would sometimes cry because they wouldn't get to see dad because he was busy with farming and taxes at the time. He's actually doing both. So he had a lot of different periods of busy seasons because there was the tax busy seasons and then the farming stuff. And so, they would go to bed at, I think it was like 7:30. You get home from school, you're awake for a few hours, and it was like early bedtime. Where's daddy? I didn't get to see daddy. And then also Evie, our second born, is not capable of being rushed. So public school really not a good fit for her because it was like, she's crying. It's like, eat your breakfast, get on the bus. It was really terrible. So those two things led us to homeschool for a time. So then we homeschooled for however long until I was getting a little pushback from my eldest. Must have been during her 5th grade year. And I just one day made the decision like, nope, we're done. You're going to public school again next year. I like homeschooling because of certain aspects of it, just the flexibility. You get to see your kids more, but I'm not like stuck on it as like I need to do this or it's like the best. I just came to realize that different kids need different things and different families need different things. And I had also said we would never have some kids in public school and some kids at home. And we ended up changing that too. It's like God just, he just, like, you plan anything out and God's like, no, you actually are going to do something different. I feel like that happens all the time. So I try not to plan anymore so that I
Right.
don't have to get disappointed or confused or whatever. So,
And I want to circle back to something I think you said. Did you and
yep.
Ryan, did you grow up together in the same place or same area?
Yeah, Ryan is from this community that we're in now. And we moved out here. My family lived in Wapaton, and we moved out near, kind of within 5 miles of where he lives when I was partly into my 1st grade year. Like, he was in my oldest brother's class at school, but we also ended up going to his church when I was a 6th grader. We started going to the same church that he goes to out in the country, and we actually attend that church again now that we moved back home. Like, we moved back home like 12 years ago, I think it was. Yeah, 13 years
Oh,
ago.
wow. So you've grown up together.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, we weren't friends though. I mean, I knew who he was. Actually, when I was in 2nd grade and he was in 6th grade, they match up the 2nd and 6th graders to have like a pal, and they will come and like the 6th graders will address the 2nd graders postcards that they've written. And Ryan was my pal when I was a 2nd grader, and he was a 6th grader. So that's super random. Um,
And also adorable.
it is kind of, except I was annoyed because I actually was assigned a girl and a guy, and then a new kid came in partway into the year and they gave the girl away. So I was stuck with the 6th grade boy, and I remember being like super disappointed about that. But whatever, it worked out in the end anyway.
Right.
So he was at my parents' house a bit when he was in high school because he was friends with both of my older brothers, and so he was around. I noticed him, and he's nice, cute. Knew he's a believer. So that's good.
Oh,
He didn't
wow.
really care about me though until I was 16 before we became friends first when I was 16 and dated when I turned 17. So,
Sure. So, what
yeah.
about now that you've got this mix of a homeschool background, now some in public school, some young kids still at home, one homeschooling? What is that like for family time as far as meals, routines, schedules? What does that look like for you?
It's a little crazy at different times of year. Like right now, the kids are in cross country. 3 of the kids are in cross country. So they're gone until supper time. I try to have supper at about 6 o'clock every day. That helps, so people kind of know what to expect. But we usually are together for suppers. We usually do like have sit down everybody together for the most part. It's kind of the way it's always been, and because of that, we have a later supper at 6. It still works even if there are sports or other events that are going on because usually they're right after school for just a little bit, and the kids get home in time. It helps that I have 2 drivers. Cora and Evie both have their driver's license, so I don't have to leave to go pick up kids anymore. Like, I have these chauffeurs to go, and if somebody else has something going on, to go fetch them or whatever, which is totally life changing, totally huge. Like, once Cora got her license, to be like, okay, I'm not doing all the running around stuff anymore, which is great because having little kids, it's a pain. to load up, especially in the winter. It's like the coats and the hats and boots, and everybody load up and go somewhere. It's like, so I don't have to do that anymore. I get to pretty much stay nice and cozy at home in the winter. And we also live really close to my in-laws. They're across the field here, and that's great because they bail us out too. Sometimes Ryan's dad will give Grace a ride over to the school quick and things if I need that. So that's super helpful. But our breakfasts are not, I mean, not together. Kids are pretty independent. I occasionally will cook them all breakfast, but honestly, that ended years ago. I used to make breakfast, like hot breakfast, like every morning. And then I have these extra kids. I don't know, these three little kids. And it's like, nope, never mind. I value my sleep too much. I'm always trying to get as much as I can. And I'm like, if the baby hasn't woken me up, I'm not going to set my alarm to get up and make breakfast. Plus, I'm not a morning person. And I'm kind of a bear for like an hour. I mean, just like, I don't I don't feel like visiting. My husband is a morning person, so he's like blah 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 blah, and I don't really like to talk to people for a while in the morning. So
I was just talking with another mom on the podcast about this very thing. I love mornings. I absolutely love them, but I don't like artificial light or noise in the mornings. I
sure.
love to watch the sunrise. I love to hear the birds. But if someone starts turning on all of the lights and slamming cupboards, or even just closing them louder than I would like, or if someone comes at me with questions right away, it's not happening.
Yeah, yeah. Of
I,
course, everybody likes the birds and the sunrise. It's all the others, like people needing me or talking to me or asking me to engage my brain. It's like this thing is not turning on. And you know what my brother just told me? He said there's something scientific about this because I was saying maybe I should just set my alarm earlier and just like become a morning person. And he told me, now I haven't fact checked this. I don't know if this is true. He was talking about people who are morning people a half an hour before they wake up, their body temperature starts to rise. So their metabolism starts to get going. And by the time they actually wake up, they're ready to go because their body's already been preparing to be awake. And a night person or a non morning person wakes up, and a half an hour later, their body temperature rises and they can wake up. And I'm like, wow, that really actually fits. And then in the evening, a morning person, their body temperature starts to cool down and they get sleepy before they're going to bed or whatever. And that won't happen the same for somebody like me who hates mornings, but I like the evenings better. It's, I might lay in bed and it takes me a bit to fall asleep or whatever. So,
well, that's fascinating. What about meal times for a family of 9? Like, what are you making? How are you doing your grocery shopping? How does that work?
well, for one, I don't like to cook. So I do not cook fancy. I have thought of like the whole, some people will be super wise and grown up and like do the meal planning and freezer meal type stuff. Yeah, I can't do that. The closest I get to freezer meals is when I buy ground beef at Sam's Club in the 10-pound log. I'll brown it all and I'll bag it in little bags and throw it in the freezer. And so then if we need tacos, it's already cooked. You just like heat it up quick or a casserole or whatever. That's as close as I get to freezer cooking. Also buying frozen pizzas, frozen lasagnas. That's my freezer cooking. But I don't cook anything that is too time consuming. In the winter, I do use my crock pot for like soup or other things, I guess, that aren't soup in the crock pot. I do a crock pot meal at least once a week, maybe twice a week. If I have not planned and I'm short on time, we do breakfast for supper. We can do pancakes and eggs or French toast or egg bake. I don't know, stuff that requires eggs because we have chickens and we
Yeah.
always have eggs coming out of our ears. So that's a good default. But I just do tacos and spaghetti, casseroles, stuff like that. We're not having braised chicken and,
Or
ham and egg
cocaine?
mashed potatoes. No, whatever that is. We're not doing that. We do things that are easy for me. Because I feel like, I mean, in order to do stuff that takes forever like that, you have to enjoy cooking. Like it's too time consuming. Unless you love it, if you just like force yourself to make really awesome meals, I don't know, you spend an hour and a half in the kitchen. It takes people like 8 minutes to eat it. and then it looks like a bomb exploded and there's stuff everywhere that you have to clean up. And I just find that, I mean, of course, I just don't like cooking, but apart from that, the time commitment for doing meals that are fancy or whatever is just nothing I'm willing to make. So,
Do any of the kids like to help you cook? Are they into it at all?
it's really funny you say that. Lucy, my eighth grader, has been saying how she would love to. She wants to cook, and we just haven't. She just has been saying that the last few weeks, and I haven't really taken her up on that. Part of it is, I mean, right now it's cross country season, so if they're getting home at 5:15 or 5:30, there is no time for her to figure that out. And if she has other things she needs to do, there really isn't a lot of time in the evening. In the evenings when the kid has sports, there's the things you need to do. You got to do your chore, you got to do your homework, you got to get ready for school the next day. And she does like to play with her little siblings. And so I think I should probably take advantage of that on the weekends. I think that Lucy would do that on Saturdays or
Hmm.
Sundays for me, probably.
So, also with a large family like that, how do you plan time away, like vacations or family trips? How do you organize that?
Oh my goodness, you're funny. That's such a big question. Do you mean personal time away? The whole thing?
Yeah, maybe that too.
Narrow it down for me.
Well,
Uh,
so something that I want to get to is,
yes.
the big story that I
Oh,
haven't mentioned yet. But you were
yeah.
on a family
Yeah.
trip when that happened. Like, but
Hmm.
how did that family trip even take place? Why were you like, you know what we should do? We should all of us just go across the country a little bit and have a big trip
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Um, we would have liked to do a lot more vacations and trips with our four big girls, but once they were old enough that it would be easier to do, we had Ida, and then we had Graham, and then we had Micah. And some people are super tough and they travel with babies and they don't get all bent out of shape over it. I personally find it really stressful. I'm like, you've got the sleeping arrangements to figure out. Like our family in a hotel, that's like a nightmare. Okay, trying to get a baby to sleep in a pack and play in the bathroom and have everybody be quiet. Like you're just trying to figure out ways to make everybody get the rest they need so they're not grouchy the next day. And then you've got diapers and naps. And I find that traveling with little kids is not ideal. And so we have not done the trips that we would have if we'd only had four kids. Like we would have done camping and just random road trips. And so we knew we wanted to see the Ark and the Creation Museum. And Cora, every year it's 1 year closer to graduating. This is it now. She's a senior this year, and so she's graduating. And we knew we wanted to fit that in at some point. And Ida and Graham were old enough to not be nursing and whatever. My mom had offered that she could, or we had asked her if she could take those two so that they wouldn't need to be on the road trip. It would just be the four big kids and Ryan and I was pregnant, and we figured it was a good time to go too because the baby's easier to take care of inside than outside. So it just somehow worked out that we thought this is the summer to do it. Let's go to the Ark. And so my mom had Ida and Graham, and then Ryan's parents I think they were already going to be visiting somebody in Illinois, or maybe they just added that on, but they were going to end up meeting us at the Airbnb that was in Indiana near the Ark, which ended up working out really well when Evie got sick because they helped with the other three kids when we were occupied with Evie. Yeah.
Yeah. So crazy turn of events. You finally get to take this trip, make memories before Cora graduates, and a lot of memories were made, but not at all in the way you expected. Do you want to walk us through what happened?
Yes. Monday morning, on the day that we were going to leave, Evie had a fever, a little touch of a fever. And we were like, what do we do? Do we go with her sick? That's kind of weird. That doesn't seem very nice. But we've already, at that point, whether it was the night before or that morning, we'd already dropped off Ida and Graham at my mom's. Like, we're ready to go. The van is packed. And she just wasn't feeling good. And we took her temp. She had a fever. And so I just gathered around her. We laid hands on her and prayed for her. And then just kind of waited, like, what do we do? And Evie said she wanted to go. She felt like we can go. It's okay. And Evie in the past would get random fevers like that nobody else would for whatever reason. She occasionally would have a fever, nobody else would. So it seemed like she'll probably be better by the next morning is what we figured. So we traveled on Monday. We stayed overnight at a hotel that Monday night, part way. And then Tuesday, she still wasn't better. We got to the Airbnb and yeah, it wasn't going away. It seemed a little bit worse. And we had her, we didn't take her in yet. We're like, well, maybe tomorrow morning she'll be better. So we slept one night at the Airbnb, and in the morning, it was worse. It was like she's just not feeling good. And I went to get her, was it the breakfast that she wasn't eating? You know how you usually have special food when you travel? I feel like there was something that
Yeah.
was like a good thing that she should have wanted to eat, and she really didn't. And she just, and it wasn't until she said, I think she said, I feel like I can't quite catch a deep breath. Like she just couldn't quite get enough. And I thought, wow, maybe she has pneumonia. It's like, well, if she has pneumonia, if we go to the doctor, we could hopefully get some medicine and she could kick this and we could still enjoy the rest of the week because we came all the way out here. So we don't want to miss out on what we're here for, right? So I took her to a walk-in clinic or urgent care, whatever was open. And they did some tests and they came back. The lady was like, told us that we needed to take her to the hospital. And I was like, what? The hospital? She said, I don't like the liver numbers, or there was a couple numbers that she didn't like. And so she had to go get x-rays too. And I think that wasn't actually in the building we were in. But either way,
On
that,
for her lungs?
yeah,
Okay.
that day, the lady caught something. I'm kind of I'm a person who does not like going to the doctor. I just don't. I mean, nobody likes it, but I kind of try to cut corners and not go when sometimes I guess I should. And so when she said that she thought we needed to go to the hospital, I was like, I was thinking that's crazy. And she said, I just don't like some of the numbers I'm seeing, but she didn't have a diagnosis. She just didn't like it. And I was like, well, could we maybe just, wait and see? Like we were gonna go see this mansion thing, and it was like, can we just go do that stuff and then go to the hospital later? And she's kind of like, well, you should go pretty soon. She's kind of encouraging us to, but of course she has no control over anything. But she's like, you really need to go. So we went back to the Airbnb and talked about it, and she had given us a prescription for an anti-nausea med. And so on the way back to the Airbnb, Evie and I stopped at a drugstore to pick up this prescription. And something I do remember is Evie always wants to be with me. And I said, do you want to come in with me? And she's like, no, I'll just sit here. Because she was feeling so yucky that she stayed in the car. And I felt like that was pretty unusual for Evie. So I was like, I thought, oh, she must really not be feeling good. But we went back to the Airbnb and talked about what are we going to do. And Ryan and I decided, okay, we'll take her to the hospital, just get this taken care of, whatever it is. So that Wednesday evening, we drove her to Cincinnati Children's Hospital. We're going to get checked into the ER, and I think they said she was dehydrated, and they were going to give her some fluids, and they're checking some things. And when they gave her the fluids, they started like basically the fluid was going into her lungs. It wasn't helping her. It wasn't doing what it should have been doing. It was making all of her symptoms worse. And so they stopped that. They didn't finish doing that. They hadn't figured out what was happening. And I don't know if it was before that or after this happened, but they were like kind of saying, oh, you'll probably be fine. You'll probably be out of here soon. But they end up moving us to the PICU, probably just because her oxygen saturation, that was a struggle to get her oxygen to be what it should be. She was on oxygen at that point, like the normal, and there was, they know all the things that are off in a kid that just aren't quite right, even if they still didn't have a diagnosis. So they sent us up just to keep an eye on her overnight in the PICU. So then they put her, the oxygen mask wasn't enough, so they put on like a CPAP that forces the air in, and so you're supposed to match your breath with it, and that was a huge struggle for Evie. Like she was like upset, and I think she just like ripped off her mask, and she's like, I can't. Like she felt like she wasn't getting enough oxygen, and to slow down your breathing and go with that was like kind of panicky for her because she just couldn't feel like she could get enough oxygen. So they gave her some sort of sedative or anxiety thing, just calm her down. So she made it through Wednesday night. But once it was the next morning or later morning, things just really started to go downhill really quickly. It's kind of a muddle in my mind right now of how it all played out. Ryan has stuff that he has recorded so that we can like written down things that happened to kind of keep it straight. But basically, her oxygen just levels could not stay where they needed to be. So she had the oxygen mask, she's on the CPAP, and then, oh, maybe it was in the BiPAP. I think there's, I don't know, nurses watching this would know more than I do, obviously. But they ended up saying that they needed to intubate her. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, we're just praying over her. I'm not worried really so much, I don't think at this point. I feel like it's kind of weird, but I guess I didn't fear for her life because I just know that God has plans for her, I guess. And we end up mentioning this at one point. Like when I was pregnant with Micah, she didn't know yet. She dreamt like 3 different times in a span of like 2 weeks, I think, that she was holding a little baby and it was a boy. She'd had this dream. And so she knew about, I felt like that was a dream from God because she didn't know I was pregnant at the time. She did, of course, when she was 6. She knew that I was, but that's also why I thought this baby was a boy, is because she had dreamt it. And so it seemed like a promise almost that Evie's going to be okay, because how can she hold this baby if she dies? So I didn't really think death was like an option on the table. I know that sounds dumb, but so just praying over her, like I was up at the head of her bed, like just praying the whole time over her. And so they intubate her. And something that is very striking to me in all this time, there's medical people doing all their stuff, is she's on that, and I look up and I see the screen with all her vitals on it, and the oxygen is reading in the 60s and dipping into the 30s, 60s, 30s, 60s, 30s, and I think she's on she's got the breathing tube in her throat, and as I'm thinking like that's the last thing you can do. Like you remember COVID, people were really sick, then they would do that. You're on a ventilator, you think like that's the last step, right? What do you do beyond that? And that's kind of when I was like, oh my goodness. And I think that's the point. And then of course, I'm sure, though I was praying the whole time, so it's all kind of a blur. I'm sure there was a lot of activity in that room, a lot of people doing stuff. But that's when I got on my phone and I texted out to my family. I just said, please pray. She's failing. Like I'm watching her body failing before me, and I don't think there's anything else you can do. And it was just like, that's kind of when I got hit in the face, like, wait, what's going on here? But what I didn't remember is there's something called the ECMO machine, the heart lung bypass thing. And so they come in and they say they're going to put her on this thing. And I could stay in the room. They told me I could, but as I'm praying over her, I'm just at the top of her bed. I'm like, so what's that like? Because I don't know anything, and it requires surgery. And I go, ooh, I don't want to see a surgery. And so this is good that I didn't stay, that I wasn't, because I'll tell you in a minute, but like I left at that point. And the only thing I remember from that is I go around the side of her bed and I look up. There's all these people. We've barely been here. I don't know any of these people. There's like this wall of medical people around her bed, and all I do is I pause to like kiss her or say goodbye, and I just look up and I say, so at this point I must have started to be really concerned about her actually making it, because I remember looking up and I looked at all of them and I said, if she makes it through this, Jesus gets the glory. And it wasn't a slam against them. I just wanted them to know that it is the Lord who will bring her through this. Like he uses people, but it would be ultimately Jesus is the one that rescued her from all of this illness. So I left, I go to the family room, and not long after, somebody comes and gets us already and wants us to come back. And so we leave, and they tell us that her heart has stopped and they're doing CPR on her right now. And we're both like, okay. And so they take us to right outside her room, and there's chairs there for us, and we sit down, and they're in there like 30 people, I don't know, a ton of people in her PICU room, and they're yelling about stuff and doing stuff, whatever. They're all like these super great medical expert people doing their stuff, and we just sit down in these chairs and we start to pray. Ryan and I are just praying together, and the hospital chaplain is there and he's with us too, and we just start praying, okay, God, like save Evie. And as we're praying, there's a guy apparently who's like doing CPR, like old fashioned, like up on her, like doing the whatever chest compression CPR, I don't know, whatever they're doing to get her going again. And apparently during those 9 minutes that her heart stopped, when he was doing this, they're still continuing the surgery. So to be on ECMO, they like slice open your carotid or whatever, and they're like feeding tubing in or whatever and getting you hooked up to this. And they were actually doing that. I don't even understand how they could do that, but they're experts, right? They're putting her on this machine, doing the surgery, as she's having somebody like, I think, on top of her doing chest compressions the whole time. So I'm like thinking of the surgeon like trying to do this delicate surgery while I can't even fathom it. If I had stayed in there to be with her during the surgery, I'm pretty sure that would have been bad for me. I think it might have been a little bit panicky. I hadn't been panicking, or anything like that. You know, we definitely do trust God. Like we believe he's real, he's in control. But I think being up close and personal to that would have been kind of crazy. So I'm glad that I wasn't in the room for that. But anyway, they get her all hooked up, whatever. And I finally get to go in and see her because they had told her, oh, her heart started again. So I think we possibly went back to the family room while they finished everything up until I could come see her. And when I went back in, Ryan did not go with me because he is squeamish about medical stuff, and so he can't handle that, which I was totally fine with. And so I just went in there alone. And when I saw her, that's when I started to just like cry because her color. I mean, I say she looked dead. She was bluish. She did not look right. She had all this, she kind of swelled up. She's holding all this fluid. And she looked like she'd already passed. And when I touched her arm, it was even cold. It was very like, oh my word. And that's when I was like, oh, Evie. And I started to cry. And it was just like the saddest thing ever. It's crazy because I don't know how much to say. We actually believe she went to heaven. You can edit what you want. I don't
No,
know.
I
I don't.
I want to hear this. So
Okay.
just to
Okay.
interject here for like I'm putting myself in a wedge in this story right now because the whole reason that I even know who you are, who Evie was because I was involved with American Heritage Girls when we lived there. She was part of the troop at that time, and she was my favorite, even though we're not supposed to have favorites, and I'm not allowed to say that. And then I get this text message from the coordinator of American Heritage Girls, one of my dear, dear friends for so many years, telling me that Evie's in the hospital and she's almost dying and I need to pray like right now. And I'm just, here in South Dakota and she's in Cincinnati. And I'm just like, what on earth? And so the only reason that I was able to keep up then was first from texts from her. But then when Ryan started the Caring Bridge, then I mean, I was like, email me for every single notification update, all the things. And that's how I was keeping up with this. But so that what I know is what Ryan put on Caring Bridge. So I want to know all of this.
Okay, I will then share what we didn't put on Karen Bridge because honestly it sounds crazy. To a lot of people it won't sound crazy. Certainly certainly some people it will sound crazy. It will even sound crazy to some Christians. So the church that we go to and that I grew up most of my growing up years are here, is not charismatic or Pentecostal or anything. But about and so we don't like outwardly exercise spiritual gifts, I guess, especially the ones that are the miraculous or ones that are controversial, I guess you should say. But through a chain of events, started with my brother, who's a pastor, and then some experiences he had, um, brought us to it. At some point, we were all at my parents' praying when we were having a family reunion with my siblings. We did listening prayer, where you basically sit quietly before the Lord and see if He'll impress something on your heart. It was the first time I'd ever done anything like listening prayer. Like we talk about being led by the Lord in different things, but I haven't really known what that could look like. And so that day when we were practicing this, like just being quiet before the Lord and seeing what He would impress on our hearts. The only one in the group, I think, at that time who'd ever done that was my brother. But anyway, during that time, my sister-in-law, who's married to my other brother, the Lord just released a prophetic gift in her where when she prays, she will see pictures. And so that was the beginning of a chain of events, I guess, that um, has grown my faith a lot. There's been a lot of stuff that has happened in our family and just in my searching, a lot of books I've been reading and stuff. It's stuff to other people. They're like, yeah, like, that's normal to me. But to us in our world, it wasn't like having a prophetic word and stuff like that. I didn't grow up with that stuff. So anyway, Trisha has this gift where sometimes when she prays, actually pretty much all the time when she prays for other people, he will show her things. He'll either give her prophetic words for people, or sometimes he lets her see into the spiritual realm. And so at the time you think like, wow, this is crazy. But if you actually look into it, there's tons of people out there who are gifted this way. This isn't like a one-off thing. There's tons of people out there where they have giftings like this. It just isn't in the circle that I grew up in or that I run in or whatever you want to say. So when Evie was sick, this gift was shown to be a help and encouragement, which started with when she was in the ER. Trisha texted or called us and just said, I want you to know when I pray for Evie, I see there's an angel over her. This was in the ER before moving into the PICU. And so that was a comfort. It was like God just reminding you, like, I'm here, your guardian angel, it's there, like, you're not alone. It was really crazy because Evie even asked at that point in the ER, she said, am I going to die? And we like laughed, like, no, you're not going to die, honey. You're going to be fine. You're just a little sick. They'll take care of you. Like, no, she actually felt at that time that she was going to die. And so later, anyway, after all this, and she's on the ECMO machine, she looks to me like she's already passed, even though she's alive because her heart's going again. Trisha, when she was praying for her, actually saw, and I know people can take this with a grain of salt, I'm just saying my experiences, but she actually believes that she saw her spirit leave her body, or like the guardian angel left. The angel that had been with Evie up to this point, she actually saw it fly away. And so we didn't know this until later. Patricia actually thinks that when she was put on ECMO, her heart stopped for 9 minutes, she's put on ECMO, that she was actually dead at that point. Now, one thing is sometimes medical people say it doesn't count to be dead if your heart stops. It's when I think your brain quits working. You know what I'm saying? Like being actually clinically dead is supposed to be your brain is not functioning, not your heart. I don't know much about it, but she believes that Evie actually was in heaven from, let's see, that would be Thursday to Friday to Saturday for like 2 days, 48 hours probably, because through all of the things that happened the next couple days, there was, the people who worked there, one of them told us later, nobody expected her to make it, like no one, just because all the things she was, septic things had just shut down, her organs had shut down. She'd been so low on oxygen even before her heart stopped. Like it was just like her body just quit. And so if she had survived, they assumed then she should have brain damage, lots of damage and stuff, but she doesn't. I mean, God fully healed her. He fully restored her. Her brain functions fine. Her heart is fine. She technically will be labeled as having maybe kidney disease, but her kidneys function just fine. Like she's thoroughly, truly healed. But it wasn't until Saturday. So Evie was unresponsive, and obviously she's on ECMO and she's sedated. But what happened was we found out on Friday, the head of the PICU wanted to meet with Ryan and I, and we went to a room and we sat down, and he let us know that they had taken her off the sedative and she had not woken up. Like they'd done it earlier in that day when we didn't know. And then he said they'd taken her off her painkillers and they were waiting to see, because you remove the sedative, okay, but the painkillers also, I'm sure, keep you sleepy. But if you are not on painkillers and you're in pain, you should wake up. And he said that if she didn't respond, they were going to do a CT scan that night on Friday night to see if she had brain activity, because if she didn't, then there was basically no point in trying anything else. What I found out later is what they were going to do, the procedure they were going to do is they're going to crack open her chest and put like a manual heart squeeze on her, because on the ECMO machine and with the way that her heart was functioning and everything, like it wasn't doing enough. It wasn't getting blood far enough to extremities, and I don't know, it wasn't good enough. They were going to actually do like this manual heart squeeze thing. So they're going to do that CT scan Friday night, late into the night. And so that night we talked to Trisha, and Trisha told us, sorry, this all sounds really crazy to like put out to the world, but Trisha told us she believed that Evie was in heaven, and she believed that God was going to give her a choice whether she came back or not. This was her thing that she believed from when she was praying, and whatever God was impressing on her heart, right or wrong, that is what she thought. And that's really when I went, oh my word, what? Like if Evie's in heaven and has a choice, why would you ever come back? Why would you do that? That's crazy. I wouldn't do that. I'd be like, sorry, I'm with Jesus. I'm happy as can be. I'm not coming back. And so that's really when I was really low that night. I was very distraught because I'm like, if that's true, she's not coming back. This is it. And it didn't make sense to me because there's the baby in the dream, right? There's these things, but
And
and so
can I ask about that quick? So you were just finished first trimester being pregnant. You were barely into your second trimester. All of this is happening now with her. The stress that that would put on you physically, let alone mentally, emotionally, all of the things. Did you ever feel like maybe your pregnancy was also jeopardized, or at least, changed because of everything that you were having to deal with right then?
it's really interesting that you say that. I I don't know. God must have just shielded me that I didn't feel like the deep distraughtness until that Friday night. Okay, so when I saw Evie right after ECMO, I was sad. I cried. That was sad, but I wasn't like hysterical out of my mind. You know what I'm saying? Like you're sad, you see your kid, but
Sure.
I wasn't like weeping and wailing and running around the hospital or anything. And Friday, I was, it was hard crying, but we all cry hard sometimes. And Saturday morning was the same kind of like I actually started planning her funeral when I was getting ready for the day before I went over to the hospital. But later, when I did have Micah, he was underweight. And my midwife, actually our nurse practitioner, thinks that it was probably the stress of that month in Cincinnati, which I didn't feel like I was at the end of my rope for a month. But I suppose there's subconscious stuff too. But he was my smallest baby. So I do think that stress, that's a good question. That stress must have caused him to have that really low birth weight for one of my kids. Yeah. But anyway, Saturday then she wasn't responsive, and I was getting ready at the Ronald McDonald House. Betty, Ryan's mom, was the first one to see, I think, her eyelids. It was like, did they flutter? She's trying to open her eyes. And she was with her when she saw that. And that was like the first anything. Like she had been completely just stone still since Thursday. And so it was wonderful. And I went in the room and she actually like squeezed my hand when I asked her things. And so she basically woke up, I think it was around lunchtime on Saturday. And I can't remember, I think Trisha, just the belief that that would have been the time then that basically Evie returned to her body. And I have no proof. I have no proof of any of this. I'm not going to know till heaven. We actually were excited because we thought when Evie woke up and was herself again that she would have a story. Like those near-death experiences, or people, if you go and look for these things, you can find people who say stuff about that they've been to heaven or whatever.
Right.
And I've read that 90 Minutes in Heaven book, but I'd never like looked into this stuff. But like if you look into it, there's a lot of people who say, yeah, I died, I went to heaven and came back. And we thought Evie might tell us what heaven was like. So that was going to be super exciting. But she doesn't have any memory of it. I'm not worried about it. I've wondered before if someday she'll just have it, or maybe that isn't what happened. Again, we don't have proof. I have just learned to, over the last 5 or 6 years, because she is my sister-in-law and because I know her to be a woman of integrity and honesty, she has helped all of us to embrace this idea of people having prophetic visions because we know her. It's not just some schmo who wrote a book or whatever. And so if her spiritual eyes, the Lord showed her that Evie was gone and came back, then it's probably right. Like she probably wasn't gone for 9 minutes. It was probably longer than that. But either way, it was a wild ride. There's other things that happened, that she went off ECMO on that Tuesday, and there was the story along with that. Basically, there was some spiritual warfare, which was confirmed very interestingly by, so this prophetic gift type thing, when people pray and see stuff, we found out Ryan has a cousin who his wife has this. I didn't know it, but she messaged us And when we read this message, something having to do with, it was a vague message, but we recognized like she's seeing something when she prays, and so we asked for more details. And she told us about this whole thing she saw in the spiritual realm, that when Evie was being taken off ECMO, and then that's a surgery. We think that Satan tried to get her again. We really do. And it was multiple things that day. People who don't know each other, one girl in our church felt led to just pray and fast that whole day for Evie. And that's not something that's really encouraged in our church. Like it's not that you can't fast, but it's not a spiritual discipline that we talk about and like encourage. And she just on her own felt that. My brother did separately. My sister-in-law did that. They were supposed to just like pray and fast that day, that something was going to happen. That she called our family to pray. There was some different spiritual things. And then we got this confirmation way out of left field from his cousin's wife. We didn't know had this prophetic gift where she basically saw some crazy spiritual battle. So it was really cool. I guess it's a good reminder to us. Prayer works. Sometimes people say prayer changes us. That's why we do it, because it's kind of like God's up there doing everything anyway. But I've come to believe, especially in the last couple of years, that if we don't pray, stuff doesn't happen. If we do pray, it really does change things. And it's easy for me to be lazy about prayer. And when I think about this and remember, it's like, yes, I really need to dedicate more time to prayer, because I do believe that it makes a difference. And I don't think I did so much before. I mean, it sounds really bad to say as a believer, but I think it kind of felt like, we talk about God's sovereign, right? God's sovereign. He's going to do what he's going to do. And it's kind of felt like there wasn't a lot of urgency and things in prayer, because it feels like, well, isn't God just up there doing what he's going to do anyway? His plans will prevail and all that kind of stuff. And now I feel a little bit differently. Like, yes, God's in control, but perhaps it is set up such that he works through the prayers of his people. And so big picture, there's prophecies in the Bible. We know how, like, in the end, Jesus wins, and there's going to be some bad stuff before the very end comes. And we know lots of things from scripture. But I think that in our day-to-day life, if we don't pray for things, stuff doesn't happen. So we do need to pray. We do need to take our role as believers seriously in having God's kingdom purposes come to pass, I guess.
Yeah, and so you were there, you said, for a month. As she was recovering and coming out of this. When was it during that time that they discovered and diagnosed what had happened?
It wasn't for a while, because they were telling us, yeah, we may never figure out what this was. And I was like, what do you mean? If you don't know what caused this, how can you try to prevent it from happening again? What if it's like some weird pre-existing condition that could like flare up where all this crazy stuff happens and you die? I didn't like that answer when they'd say, yeah, we don't know if we'll ever know. So I think it was a few weeks in. And it's interesting because when we looked back at the medical records, a doctor had recognized it in the beginning as a possibility that it was hantavirus and had sent out the test. I think the test just took a few weeks to get back. But he had, one of the infectious disease doctors had recognized it in some note. He had listed off a few things, and that was one of the options. We just needed to get the blood work and the testing stuff back. But they didn't say, oh, we think it could be, and here's a list of the things it could be. It's just they were busy working on all of these things that they didn't know, and doing lots of tests and asking us questions and trying to figure stuff out. But yeah, the hantavirus, totally, totally crazy. It comes from rodents. You can inhale either droppings, or you can like inhale, like if you were to clean out an old shed and there's like mouse bedding and you inhaled particles, you can get sick. It's weird because the hantavirus is supposedly so easy to catch because you can inhale particles. And yet, in the entire time since they started recording cases, since I think it was the 80s, there's been less than 1,000 cases recorded in the US. So it's like super easy to catch, and also not easy to catch at all because nobody has it. It's incredibly rare. The thing that's weird about it is Evie is like our most indoor girl. She likes to play the piano. She likes to stay clean. She's not into running around in the sunshine, getting hot and sweaty. Like she's not an animal lover. Like she's not the kind of kid that would get this. So we don't actually know for sure how she picked it up. I actually don't think it was at our house. She had been in a different state a couple weeks before she got sick. She'd been outdoors a lot in that state that she was in. And so I actually suspect she probably picked it up there because the incubation period works out. And that's also helpful to think of because I'm like, I don't actually want to think that she caught it anywhere on our property because I just can't.
Right.
I can't go there. I mean, I've never cared about mice. They've never freaked me out or anything. You're out in the chicken coop and there's a mouse or droppings or whatever. I don't panic over that. But after we got back home and I was in the garage sweeping and the little kids were running around playing and I saw mouse droppings in a spot and I was like, and I just had this moment of like, oh my word, the little kids, they should not be in the garage. Like they could inhale something. And it was like, oh my goodness, how can I live the rest of my life being terrified of this? And I had to just stop and be like, oh, I did send them out of the garage, but I just had to give it to God. I was like, okay, God, I cannot live my life in fear of this, that we will have a repeat of this. I just need to trust you. You let this happen for your glory, for whatever reason your purposes are, and I am not going to be controlled by fear every time I see a mouse dropping. I live in the country. We have 17 acres. We have chickens. People come into contact in farm equipment with mice droppings. Like that's very common in the semi trucks or wherever, or the shop or grain bins. It's like, it's just kind of a part of life. And I just had to lay down my fear and be like, Lord, I'm just going to trust you with all this because I can't carry that. I can't run
Yeah.
around paranoid.
Then it was also like 4 or 5 months later that Evie does get to hold her baby brother. And did you
Yeah.
feel like that was, I guess things had come full circle, or did it change your perspective on your own motherhood at all?
Mhm. It was very wonderful that she got to hold Micah. I'm sure we photographed the first one there. It was very redemptive. It's funny when Evie was sick. It's actually not funny. I don't say this, but when she was sick, I just wanted a second chance. I was like, if
Hmm.
she dies, I want to go back. And I think I posted about this on Karen Bridge of like, you want a second chance. You want to spend time talking to your kids more, appreciating them more. I wanted to take longer when I would tuck her to bed because that's when she'll talk a lot. She'll open up then and share, and everybody else is gone, and just to enjoy her. And I wanted a second chance to be a good mom, I guess. The truth is that I am human and I'm and a limited one at that, I guess, where I have my second chance. All my kids are here. I don't have to be living what so many parents do live in the loss of their child, where they have that daily grief. Like I get another chance to try to be a good mom to Evie and to all my kids. But the truth is that I still only have 24 hours in a day. I still only have X amount of energy. I still have 7 kids to take care of. And my heart is that I want to be intentional and enjoy all the moments and spend extra time with all my kids. But there's a lot of them. And it has helped me, I think, hopefully, in my good moments to try to appreciate them and not get as annoyed about the things that just come along with having kids, the messes they make or the chores they don't do or whatever. I don't want to be bothered by those things. I want to love them well. But I also get tired and I also get burnt out. And I am also taking care of 3 little kids that just need a lot right now. And so I find that I have not all of a sudden magically become some superhero parent just because I almost lost my daughter. I'm still me, and we're still a messy family that we have our problems. We argue and fight and have to forgive each other, and we make messes, and we're just a normal family with plenty of problems like all people do. And I do hope that I am better at least in my heart and in the way that I treat them, of giving them grace when they mess up. I want to be that, but sanctification is a long process. It doesn't happen
Hmm.
overnight. my eyes may have been opened even more to like the brevity of life that it can be for anybody at any moment. Like Evie was healthy and then she was gone. Like it didn't take very long. Though I can see that none of us is guaranteed another day. I'm still just a broken person every day walking through life with my kids, doing the best that I can, trying to apologize when I mess up, trying to appreciate the little moments. But it's true that I do not like now like tuck Evie in and spend 2 hours talking to her. I just don't. I don't have the physical time so much. And also at the end of the day, I'm really shot. I'm shot. And it's like, you guys need to go to bed.
And probably as a 16-year-old, she appreciates that you are not tucking her in, but
Actually, she is the one kid that would appreciate it if I did it. I
oh,
don't
bless
all the
her.
time,
See, this is
but
why
she
she
likes
was my favorite.
she she likes us to come and say good night. It's not like we're tucking and whatever, but she does
Right.
like us to say good night to her. She is the most sensitive, emotional, kind of enjoying that connection. I mean, all the kids would, but she asks for that sort of stuff more than the other kids do. She's not afraid to be like, "Hey, come and say good night, come tuck me in," or whatever. She's not afraid to do that. She
Yeah.
will do that.
So let me ask you then, you had mentioned in the very beginning of our conversation that when you got pregnant with Micah, it was kind of you weren't exactly happy about it. This seventh pregnancy, seventh baby, what are we doing? Then you go through all of this with Evie in the hospital. Did that shift your perspective on your pregnancy with him?
I'm just appreciating it, you mean?
Or
Like that sort of thing?
maybe instead of lamenting or like, oh, I can't believe, like I don't know if I really wanted this, to now being like, I will take
Oh yeah.
this child and any child you give me, I guess is what I'm.
Yeah. Yes, I know what you're saying. I think just in general, I hope that yeah, I want to appreciate all of my kids, whatever, whether they're a baby or 18, because you don't know how much longer you'll have with them. I mean, we should appreciate them no matter what, but we can think, I'm going to live till I'm 90 and I'm going to see my kids my whole life. I want to appreciate each day for what it brings. Honestly, it's hard to do in the middle of life and messy house and lots to do and kids activities. It can be hard to do that. I feel like I'm in this training process for myself still, of like slow down, smell the roses kind of a thing. Don't let the lists that I have to do overwhelm me. Like try to stop and see the people. This is what I'm doing all of this for anyway. This house I'm trying to run is for these people. So why get bent out of shape over stuff? And well, part of it's just natural. It's stressful to have everything look like a bomb blew up. But I think what I learned a lot from this is I am not here to live my life for myself. I am here to live my life for God. He created me. He has a plan for me. And I don't want to fight that. I want to accept whatever his will is for me in the best way possible. I do it imperfectly, but I do want to honor him in all that I do. Whether it is, whatever, even if Evie hadn't made it, I hope my response would have been the right one, that I would have continued to trust God. Though it would have been like, it's not like that makes it easy. It doesn't. It's people who have suffered child loss, as you know, you have, right? You have suffered that.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not like it's just, yay, it's fine, no big deal, God's got it. It would be like the moment to moment, the daily suffering, but entrusting yourself to the Lord every day. And I hope that would have been me. I had a slight taste of something that actually was really beautiful, which was when Evie it was probably Thursday and Friday when she was very, we didn't really know what was going on. Ryan and I experienced something we never had before, is that when you're in the midst of something that is so crazy and like difficult and sad, we were compelled to worship. If you would have told me I would have felt compelled to worship God over the body of my child in the PICU, I would have been like, really? But it was true. I mean, I would turn music on and like looking like a dork to the nurses, just like worship God over her comatose body. And it was amazing. I can't even describe it. It was something one thing that I really value out of that whole experience was that no matter what, God is worthy to be worshiped. No matter what happens to us, he is still worthy of our worship. That is never going to change. And I got a little taste of that when I did have my faith tested in a sense during especially those couple days, that I wasn't freaking out at God. I felt like worshiping him. And I'm not judging anybody who's saying they did freak out at God. I'm sure I would have had days of that too if Evie hadn't made it. But in those moments that were really dark for us, we both were just like putting worship songs on, and it was something that was it was so neat. I can't really describe it, I guess. And so for Micah too, and this having a child that I didn't really want to have another kid to take care of because I felt so stretched already. I do believe that, I mean, I even knew the month I'd get pregnant. Like there was just different things where I knew that I was going to have another baby, that's what God wanted for us. And it's a thing again of like, my life is not my own. It belongs to God. And if he would have taken Evie, and if he's asked me to bear another child for his kingdom, I'm going to do it. And it doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean I like it all the time. I mean, obviously I want my baby now, don't get me wrong. But like when I was pregnant and going through pregnancy again, which is not my favorite, of just like, I want to do what God has called me to, so that when I get to heaven, I get to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Like that's what I want. And so I don't know. It's messy, life is busy and crazy, and I'm certainly not a perfect mom by any stretch of the imagination or a perfect Christian, but my desire is to honor God. So
Laura, I thank you so much for being transparent and just authentic and sharing not only about Evie's story, but your journey through motherhood. And thank you so much for being willing to come on and share and be raw and real with the listeners.
thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. Be sure to follow the Motherhood Experience on Instagram, and please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.